unpack the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Tasman Talk. Jointly produced by the unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now here's Tim Willems in Australia and Dieuwe in New Zealand.
Hello everyone and welcome to another week of Tasman Talk. The date is Tuesday the 18th of February 2020. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne on this wet, windy and stormy day. You're on mute, Dieuwe.
There we go. 9 p.m. Sorry. It is 9 p.m. here in Auckland. And we actually had a sunny, humid day, and we had some rain come through from the south. It's finally reached Manukau, so it's just been raining here, and it's really hot and muggy, and it's the first rain that we've had this year.
We were told that it was not going to rain in New South Wales. Our Bureau of Meteorology told us it wasn't going to rain until May, but it started raining last week. In fact, there was flash flooding in New South Wales, which, well, weather stations, they've always got weather projections wrong, which of course begs the question: how can you know what the average global temperature will be in 50 years' time?
Exactly, and we didn't have any rain predicted until next Saturday, and it had been like that for the past few weeks. So they had like last week it was like it'll rain on Saturday, and then it'll rain on Saturday, and so on. So I think the forecasts are pretty rubbish, but I do hope we get some more rain because it's been incredibly dry. We have water shortages in much of Auckland. They didn't quite put us into restricted mode yet here in the city, but a lot of the outer farm areas have ran out of water.
How does New Zealand go with the construction of dams? Because we have dam phobia in Australia because, well, ever since Tim Flannery told us in 2007, even the rain that falls won't fill our dams and river systems. And so state governments built these desal plants, which are mothballed, and they chew up a ton of electricity, so not good for the climate.
We were fairly good with dam building, but the latest project on the South Island, and I forget the name of it, has actually been sunk by the Greens at the moment. So the Greens aren't happy, even though it's renewable energy. It's because it disrupts the local ecosystem a little bit, and so that's their objection to it.
Well, the former leader of the federal Greens, Bob Brown, he now opposes wind farms because it ruins his aesthetic view in northern Tasmania. So they're just left with solar now.
Oh, lovely. So you basically have to be it's like you can run the fridge like half of the day or something, like they have out in some of these super remote places.
Yeah. But what about those vintage roofs? You'll have to cover them all with those ugly solar panels.
Well, aesthetics have never really been the strong point of communism, have they?
Well, no, but the modern day communists are quite NIMBY as well.
Yeah, you're right. They definitely are. It's going to be, at least we have rising electricity prices, of course, so the Greens are really interfering with the power generation in New Zealand, but who knows?
We're still winning in Australia the electricity price rip-off.
Yeah, and you'd be thinking your prices would be lower, like you guys have got coal and all kinds of other stuff, and instead here in New Zealand we somehow are managing to get off slightly better.
We dig it up, but it's the trend is to ship it overseas, and I know that the green and environmental activists are trying to include our coal experts in our national carbon footprint to make us even feel more guilty.
This is something I've cottoned on to, which is the fact that your coal exports don't count towards your carbon footprint, and your oil exports don't either. So the trick is just to focus as much of your economy into oil and coal as possible, and then you can lower your carbon footprint immensely.
Now, we are live on the Unshacked's YouTube channel for this show, as we are on every week, which means you can directly send a super chat through the live chat. So make yourself known in the live chat, and you can send through a super chat, which I will read out by pressing the dollar button. Have you got, I know on the Right Minds channel you've been using entropy, but you told me before the show running into the same problems that I and our viewers were running into.
Yes, entropy is down at the moment. At least it was 5 minutes ago when I tried to get it up and running for the show. So no extra questions or donations for messages to read out on the show, which is a bit of a shame because I was planning on running some polls as well. We talked last week about changing the time slot of the show and the date or the day of the week to a Friday. Sort of 6 p.m. Melbourne, 8 p.m. Auckland time. So if you're in the chat and you're keen for that, let us know. A few people last week said they would much prefer that. So we're going to give that a go in March. So the rest of February shows, which I can check quickly how many more we have. One more. So next week's show will be on a Tuesday. And then after that, we're going to switch over to a Friday and a slightly earlier time as well. And I hope you like the new visuals as well. We had a new holding screen. We've got a new banner down the bottom. Thank you very much to my wife Amy for making those for us. I hope she's watching. But she's done a good job, and she said she didn't have any time to do a good job of it. But I think she's done quite amazingly with that.
And for the grammar files, the dash is in between trans and Tasman.
Yes, that was very important. I got many complaints about that. And we have one other option as well. It has been suggested we change the name of the show to Tasman Talk.
Yeah, got it up here.
We have an alternative name here, and Tim can bring that up in a second. So I was going to have a little poll on that as well. I may just run that in the Right Minds group or page, probably a public one at some point in the future, and see if people like the idea of using the alternate name for TTT. So up to you guys, really, at this point. We may switch between them just for fun.
Because I know that a few of our followers they get quite triggered by the trans in the name, especially Dave Hiscock, my co-host on the Uncockables. I really riled him up last week when I kept affirming a transgender's new gender identity, which he didn't want to. It's
a friend of mine has nicknamed the show Tranny Talks, so that's
even though we're both biological males and identify as males.
But we do talk about trannies a lot, so it's not that bad. I see the chat is happy with the new the possibility of a name switch anyway. So we'll see how that goes. We'll keep that in our pockets.
Jupe Keck has proposed the name Traddy Time.
Oh, beautiful.
And remember the word trad at the moment, it quite triggers the left because of, well, Australia's own Brisbane trad wife getting up early to make sure everything's ready for husband and children's days. And I saw, Sky News had this new debate show on Sunday nights, in my view, and their token lefty were saying how this is retrograding to the 1950s. This doesn't help any families with the work-life balance. Men have to work harder and blah blah blah.
Yeah. I'm glad to be part of the trad life movement, and Amy likes being a trad wife. So as long as it triggers the lefties, it's even more fun as well to push it along.
I recall your Facebook tagline was "card-carrying member of the patriarchy."
Yes, that's right. I've actually got to make some changes to my bio on the BFD, and I may draw that in as well. I've actually I should have announced that we are live on the Right Minds YouTube channel, which is embedded into a post on the BFD as well. And actually, one of our news items this evening involves the BFD and something apparently very triggering that they have done. So we'll get to that later. But first, I wanted to continue the trad subject, and I wanted to tie in a little bit with your favorite anti-communist ever. There is people will remember. Well, some of you may remember anyway, because you may or may not have children. But the children's show Paw Patrol has been criticized by a Canadian professor as being too capitalist and promoting the free market and being degrading to government. And so BabylonBee wrote a hilarious story about a hypothetical Paw Patrol episode in which the pups round up commies around Adventure Bay. And I quote here, dubbed Pups Save Capitalism, the episode kicks off with Mayor Goodway attending a secret communist meeting in which she and the other filthy commies conspire to seize the means of production. Ryder and the pups catch wind of this and kick off an inquisition around the bay, bringing in suspects and grilling them on their alleged ties to the Communist Party. And on it goes. And they've changed the tagline to say, no commie is too big, no pup is too small. Whenever you see a commie, just yelp for help. And on it goes. And of course, it ends out with Tim's favorite reference here. Any commies they capture are chucked out of Sky's helicopter. And I thought that was an interesting, a nice little tie-in to bring a past episode in full circle. So even my kid's favorite TV show is now triggering the libs. So.
Yeah, I remember I didn't realize until I was an adult how much of a brainwashing exercise it was. Captain Planet.
Yes.
Yeah, which it was basically all these greedy capitalists dumping all this pollution, and there was one character. He was literally like he was like this fat, like he did look like a human pig. He was this businessman.
Of course, yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, my parents never let me watch Captain Planet. So.
Yeah, but do you know who it was created by?
No.
Ted Turner, the creator of CNN.
Of course. So what you're saying is that CNN is basically Captain Planet, but pretending to be news.
And, well, Ted Turner, he created this anti-capitalist show, even though he's a really rich businessman.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's usually the way it goes. Oh, good. But anyway, so thankfully, my children these days can grow up with some more pro-capitalist propaganda instead, apparently. So there's some good news. Some good news today.
Peppa Pig, one of our conservative columnists, Piers Ackerman, because when our ABC was facing, or not budget cuts, but not the increase they were expecting in an efficiency dividend, they were threatening to axe Peppa Pig, which is one of their popular children's shows. And Piers Ackerman actually said this would be a good thing because Peppa Pig is a ratbag feminist.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yes, my wife doesn't let our children watch Peppa Pig either because she's much too lefty. I absolutely agree with that. So down with Peppa Pig, up with Paw Patrol. And speaking of like Paw Patrol and they do firefighting and all that stuff, you've got a good firefighter story for us tonight.
Yes, Fireman Paul. You might have seen his a viral spray at Scott Morison. He was a volunteer firefighter with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. He was fighting fires in the town of Nelligan, I think I've said that right, which is inland around Bateman's Bay on the New South Wales south coast, which was devastated. And this was at the height of the rage against ScoMo on Twitter. And this is what he told the Channel 7 crew at the time.
Firefighters are exhausted and one cannot contain his anger.
You from the media, tell the Prime Minister to go and get from Nelligan.
And from a female colleague to the PM.
Stand down now.
High emotion amid desperate, dangerous and almost deadly work that sees that first firefighter collapse by the roadside.
I've lost 7 houses already in Nelligan. I'm not going to lose any more.
It was close, but heroic efforts saw most saved.
So he was later placed on, it was reported at the time that he was placed on leave due to exhaustion, because you saw after he said that, he collapsed because of exhaustion. And there's a few people who said, oh, that language against the Prime Minister, but he was clearly tired and emotional, and he explained that his comments were because Scott Morison at the time said that firefighters don't want to be paid because they want to be there.
Oh yeah.
And so
that's a genius thing to say. Very high IQ.
So he's popped up again, Paul Parker, on the Sunday night project with Peter Van Onselen and Lisa Wilkinson, where he claims he was dismissed from the Rural Fire Service for his anti-ScoMo spray.
Last night on the project, Paul Parker claimed that he'd been sacked because of his outburst, but today the PM set the record straight.
When the fires were at their most intense, and the PM had just returned from Hawaii, tensions were running high.
Tell the Prime Minister to go and get from Nelligan. We really enjoy doing this head.
Last night, the project revealed what happened to Paul Parker following that spray.
And I said, what's going on? And he said, you're finished because of your allegations and foul language against the Prime Minister of the country.
Today, the PM took his side.
There should never be any question about whether he should have been fired or not. Of course he shouldn't. But the RFS have confirmed this morning that he wasn't, by the way. And I'm pleased about that.
He hasn't been removed from the organisation. He's still an active member. We're not aware of where that message is coming from.
Just one big misunderstanding, apparently. But what did Scott Morison think about the colourful spray?
Look, I've got a thick skin and I understand that over the period of the summer, that the people felt really raw.
His comments that he made towards RFS members around the fact whether we should or shouldn't get paid, and his direct comment that we enjoy doing the job.
The PM blaming the media for another misunderstanding.
Now, Scott Morison, he said that the comment was misconstrued by the media, i.e. that they're all running on ScoMo derangement syndrome, as demonstrated by the fact that Channel 7 had no qualms in airing that spray. And I don't know about the other woman who said stand down now. She hasn't come forward. We don't know if anything's become of her, but Scott Morison said that what he meant to say was that they want to be fulfilling that duty to their communities, that they want to save their communities. Like he didn't mean that they want to, they like doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, it seems to be that, because he spoke about on the project that he was told by his local captain that he was finished and they didn't like his comments. So it seems to be that his local brigade turned on him, rather, because the Rural Fire Service said that for somebody to be dismissed from the organisation, that there has to be a disciplinary hearing. Like there's a due process to sack someone from a volunteer role. But there was trending on Twitter last night, I stand with Paul Parker trending, and at the time there was a petition because there were a lot of reports that he'd been sacked at the time. But yesterday there was a massive plot twist to Fireman Paul, which I'm just going to play to you now. That's not it. Here we go.
There's only one person that cares about this country, and that's Pauline Hanson. Come and see us in Nelligan, Pauline. Mate, you're unreal, you care about the country. The rest of them don't.
And so he wasn't giving ScoMo a spray because he supports Labor and the Greens and the climate change agenda, because he thinks all the major party politicians are ratbags and Pauline's the only people's politicians at Parliament.
I hope that all of the greenies and all of the lefties, they all sign this politician. They all signed the petition to have him reinstated before they found out who his favorite politician was.
Well, Osman Faruqi, who used to be a writer at Junkie, then he was editor at the ABC. He's moved down to Melbourne. He hosts some no-name podcast show called the 7 a.m. Podcast, and he's always raging about discrimination against Australians of colour and white supremacy. And so this was his tweet in response. The goddamn Nelligan dude is a One Nation supporter. Are you fucking kidding me? Is anyone here not a white supremacist? Come on. Though for what it's worth, firing right-wingers for telling the PM to get fucked is likely to foster the exact kind of resentment Hanson is tapping into, so it's still dumb.
Yeah.
So there were some that turned on him, but to their credit, there were quite a few prominent lefties who said he shouldn't be sacked for blasting the Prime Minister because, well, we have free speech in Australia. You're allowed to call the Prime Minister whatever you want, and we've always disparaged our leaders. And, well, as Scott Morison said, he can take it. He knows that he's the national punching bag.
It's interesting. It's quite the opposite in New Zealand recently, where I didn't click through to the story, so I only have the barest of context on it. But apparently, Jacinda responded to some hater on Twitter or Instagram or whatever with some comment, and people were saying, "Oh yeah, she owned this negative detractor, this detractor making negative comments about her." But it's just. Yeah, it's like that. This is what happens to politicians and prime ministers, especially, is that they basically have to be able to take it. They have to be able to be the punching bag, and they have to be able to take the criticism and the heat and people calling for them to resign, calling them useless, and everything like that, without sort of jumping into the mud alongside them.
And, well, to Jacinda Ardern's credit again, when Alan Jones made an infamous sock down the throat comment, all the lefties in Australia were outraged, but Jacinda Ardern, she just brushed it off saying, I don't have an opinion on everyone who makes a comment on me. And, like, Alan Jones, he wrote to Jacinda Ardern saying, obviously my language was a bit hyperbolic. Hopefully you and I can have a discussion at some point, and she actually wrote back. He didn't read it out, Alan Jones, but basically sort of, I know that this is just part of the cut and thrust of politics. So she didn't take Jacinda Ardern. She didn't run with the outrage, which she hasn't to a degree. I still don't like her social justice and exactly. Poster feminist girl image, but she doesn't get sucked into that.
Yeah. And so yes, and this is probably a good part to switch into the serious fraud office investigations, because
I'm not done on Osman Faruqi. We've got to give him another shout out for how he celebrated Valentine's Day. Yeah, what did you do?
Oh, of course. Well, I actually it was the day after my birthday, so I didn't actually end up doing very much. So we've got a 2-month-old baby, and so we just sort of took it easy, and we were planning to do something nice, and in the end it just ended up being a normal evening. So I do owe Amy a much better Valentine's Day when Esme is a little bit older.
So this is how Osman Faruqi celebrated the day. If your heart aches a bit on Valentine's Day, I can strongly recommend reading the detailed blow-by-blow account of Captain Cook's violent death on this day in 1779. A heartwarming story of Indigenous revenge, and I guarantee his heart felt worse. So that's how he... some radical leftists celebrated a day of love. They celebrated an arrow going through the heart of Captain Cook, who discovered Australia.
And New Zealand, basically discovered New Zealand as well, rediscovered it.
Yeah, and obviously the Cook Islands as well, which
and
are named
the Cook
after
Islands and many other places. He was one of the probably the best explorer of his time, and perhaps one of the best explorers of all time. And the left hate him for what? Bringing civilization to the remotest parts of the world. for lifting the descendants of all of these islanders out of their paganism and poverty, and it's just absolutely it's just disgusting, really. And one of our MPs actually liked a similar tweet to that about someone celebrating the death of Captain Cook, and it was I believe it was Golriska Harriman, the everyone's favorite fake refugee MP. She had to, of course, like that tweet as well, which
she's like a combination of our two worst Greens MP and Sarah Hanson Young and Osman Faruqi's mother, Maureen Faruqi, who's a Greens senator, because she seems to get triggered, and like Sarah Hanson Young does, and has also got the non-white immigrant chip on her shoulder, like Maureen Faruqi. Yeah.
So anyway. Have you got any more on this, or is it?
No, I think I've given Mr. the Faruqi or the Faruqi family enough of a shout out.
All right, cool. Well, I'm sure they're grateful for your endorsement. We in New Zealand we had Jacinda trying to distance herself from the investigation into the New Zealand First Foundation. It was a recommendation that was from the Electoral Commission that was referred to the police last week, and the police referred it to the Serious Fraud Office, who will be investigating any possible breaches of the law there. And we also have some further developments in the National Party donations. So they ended up having two separate $100,000 donations that were broken up. And so basically they come from one individual and they're broken up into chunks that are less than $15,000 so that they don't have to disclose who the donor is. Then those people donate it on behalf of that, which is a crime.
Yeah, this was in the National Party.
Yes. So
is this the one about the Chinese businessman?
Yeah, so one of them were Chinese businessmen. I believe the others were related to some possibly an Indian businessman or something like that. I didn't. The full details of that one are actually still coming out now, so I won't say too much.
Was the $100,000 given in I'm not sure if you have Audi in New Zealand, but that's now the CCP linked businessman. Krang Jangimo, he gave $100,000 to the New South Wales Labor Party in cash in an Audi bad, which is funny because the federal government is looking to outlaw cash transactions over $10,000, and yet you have like one of the major parties accepting 10 times that amount.
Yeah, in cash. That should set off the alarm bells. Now these ones were just donated to bank accounts on these occasions, and again, like they were split up and donated by multiple people, so the party should have reasonable deniability there to say they didn't know and they didn't have a way of following
it's basically a laundering operation, which is what New South Wales Labor Party attempted to do with this $100,000 donation. They had like a fundraiser where they attributed these $100,000 donations to just random members of the Chinese Australian community. And New South Wales Electoral Commission went through saying, hang on, like they actually did like an audit. I don't think that person could afford to donate that money on their income. They basically, it was sort of like a combination of electoral and tax audit. That's how they got busted.
Yeah. And so I have something similar going on here with the National Party one in particular, which is donated to these large, which is related to these large donations. It's unlikely anybody in the National Party is liable because, again, as far as they know, the people donating the money were, they were the people giving the money. They didn't know where it came from before it reached those people. So
it's different from the New South Wales situation where it was this businessman, he broke up the money himself.
Yes. So
these because it was.
And I believe that's the case in both cases. It'll be the case. The money was broken up before it reached the party, in which case they can deny it. And also the other. The New Zealand First one, which I'll focus on a little bit more here, is the New Zealand First Foundation was taking donations and spending it on behalf of the New Zealand First Party. So they could take large donations and then not declare them. They could be over $15,000 because it was not a donation to a political party, and they were not treating it as donations to political parties. But then they were spending it as such. And that could be, and that could damage New Zealand First leadership and other staff a lot more, because the people who were donating to the foundation generally did believe they were donating to the party, and so that can become a lot more of a sticky situation. And now that the Serious Fraud Office is investigating, we'll find out more about that as it comes through. But again, probably people like Winston Peters have reasonable deniability there, and that, oh, well, they didn't know what was going on. Well, that's usually the case, right? They've covered for themselves pretty well.
In the New South Wales Labor Party donation scandal, they basically, the sacrificial lamb was the New South Wales Labor Secretary General, Kayla Murnane. She was dismissed, but she got a payout on the way from the party as well, because she was basically being the scapegoat for it, and they had a review into their governance. So that something like that can't happen again.
I imagine we'll get a similar thing, and probably in the National Party case, likely nobody in the National Party hierarchy will be at fault or found to be at fault. Whether they actually are at fault is always a different story. And in the New Zealand First Party, it's far more likely somebody internally will have to be found at fault, because the donations were made. The people making the donations were being legitimate, but the way the party or the foundation was handling these donations likely is more likely to have been improper. Winston Peters denies all of this. He's done several videos on this and answered questions and says, oh, there's nothing going on here. So it's just a case of waiting to see what happens here. But I would caution people into saying, oh, well, it's going to bring down, it's not going to bring down the Serious Fraud Office is not going to bring down Simon Bridges, and they're not going to bring down Winston Peters. I would say that's incredibly unlikely, and so we're likely to see some fall guy appear somewhere in the near future.
Maybe they should supercharge it to be the Super Serious Fraud Office.
Exactly. Yeah, but I forgot to open with that. You're saying, oh, what's going on here is serious, because it's called the Serious Fraud Office. So,
it's basically the name is meant to virtue that we take this serious.
So that is actually what it is, because the police actually escalate to the Serious Fraud Office. So this is not a matter the police are investigating. They've actually said, oh, this is too big for us. It's going to the Serious Fraud Office. So it will be interesting to see how this dirty how any of this dirty money will come out. Where the trail of dollar bills will lead on the story. We're gonna have to keep following it, possibly for months. You go.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a loophole in your electoral laws, and that you don't have under your electoral act a classification of associated entities, which, as the name suggests, they act on behalf of political parties like we do under Australian electoral law. So I'll just share, I got this up, what an associated entity is. That is controlled by one or more registered political parties, operates wholly or solely to an extent. And it says examples of associated entities include 500 clubs, think tanks, registered clubs, service companies, trade unions, and corporate party members. And there's a financial disclosure guide for associated entities. There's quite a bit of a debate going on in the Australian political scene where they get up, which is the progressive activist group, whether they should be classified as a associated entity of Labor and the Greens, given that they tend to target conservative MPs. They helped get rid of Tony Abbott in his seat of Warringah by supporting Zali Steggall claimed that she never had anything to do with Get Up, but they were certainly active in Warringah and helping her get elected.
Yeah, and somebody can correct me in the chat here about whether we have such a clause in New Zealand politics, but I've never heard of it, and that could be an interesting fix. There are talks about lowering the threshold of declarable donations, about blocking companies and organizations from donating, but I don't believe any of those fixes would solve the loopholes that we have here. Probably an even better one would be to say only someone who can vote, so someone who's a citizen or something along those lines could make a donation that would help to clear some of it up, but not in the New Zealand First case where the donors were likely New Zealand industry insiders. So we've talked about the racing industry in the past, and the fishing industry, and possibly logging industries. It's likely there were people inside there making these large donations who wanted to remain anonymous. So we'll see how that comes out. I'll take a little break here. By the way, some of the chat here. Somebody has reminded people to click like. Yes, please do help out with that. And I did have a question here around my daughter's name being Esme. Yeah, that's correct, and it's with 2 E's actually for the comments there. So the big development in this fraud story actually has been that there has been a leaker inside the New Zealand First Party who's been leaking information to journalists, or probably someone who was formerly involved. And it was a former New Zealand president, Lester Gray, I think. That's the likely the source, because
are you allowed to say his name on YouTube and Facebook? Because it's obviously legal to say his name, but remember, Facebook and YouTube make up their own laws with regard to protecting whistleblowers. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not saying he is. I'm saying that somebody else is saying that he is. But because there was a photo that was taken of him meeting with several journalists, what's the guy's name here? Guyan Espiner, not really sure how to say his name. Apparently he's some investigative journalist. And so Winston Peters, or one of his people, snapped a photograph of them meeting and talking, and they leaked that to the BFD. And an author at the BFD published this. And so now there are allegations basically saying that either Winston Peters is writing or leaking information to this new media news site, and that they're actually shilling for New Zealand First and somehow controlled by New Zealand First, because one of the authors is a New Zealand First supporter. Even though this because my stuff is published on this website as well. So we have supporters there of the New Conservative Party. There are authors who are supporters of the ACT Party. There are authors there who support the National Party, and there is even an author who supports the Labour Party. And then somehow, because one of the authors is supporting New Zealand First, but because they've published a bit of an insight into some of this, into some of the slimier stuff that's going on behind the scenes, what these journalists are up to, basically saying, it's unethical to be following journalists around and to be taking photos of journalists. It's unethical.
You're intimidating the free press.
You're practicing journalism without a license. You can't do you can't do to journalists what journalists do to you. That's not allowed to be done.
Which is the what's happened in Australia with the mainstream press through all the mainstream media have got together for the Your Right to Know campaign, because there's been 2 AFP raids, one on the ABC, one on a News Corp journalist, Annika Smethurst, over national security leaks. The ABC contested the legality of the raid in the federal court this week. They lost and are forced to pay costs, but the mainstream media, of course, they have no qualms about supporting politicians cracking down on other people's free speech, but when their freedoms are threatened, then they don't like being held to the same standards as they hold others to.
Exactly, that's it. And I don't like New Zealand First. I don't like Winston Peters one bit. But basically, what's happening to these journalists is the bit that I'm really enjoying. I haven't been following it too closely, but I did read up a little bit so I could talk about it on the show here. And what's going on here is quite funny. This is hopefully going to develop a little bit further. I saw today they had escalated. It had first been just called a blog in the media. Sort of developed. So they said this photo was posted on a blog. And then the next day was a blog connected to whale oil, which was, as you know, Cameron Slater's previous website. And he doesn't run the BFD, but his wife does. And so that's connected to whale oil. And then I just 2 hours ago, before we went on air, the latest headline said that Winston and Peters is connected to a far right blog. So we're waiting. We'll see what they come up with tomorrow.
Yeah, they alternate between saying, "Oh, you're nothing," or "You're part of a grand right-wing conspiracy," which was a coin termed by Hillary Clinton. I saw somebody, some on the left, tried to disparage like the Unshackled, saying, "Oh, we're a WordPress site," but like the White House is on WordPress. Like...
Exactly. Yeah. And but so, yeah, that's what they try and do. So they get, which is why I like the to call them the legacy media, and I'm now going to use the term far left activists to describe some of the journalists, because I think it's all fair. It's all fair to do these things now.
Yeah, there's I know there's one. Or what would you call them? A right-wing public figure who calls those on the left left-wing bigots, far-left neo-fascists.
And that's a good one. And give them a little bit of a taste of their own medicine.
Yeah, because they get really triggered by that.
And they've run out of words too, though, because now it's like now the BFD is far right. So basically, anyone who's anyone who's supporting the National Party, or even some Labor, the old guard of the Labor Party is now far right, and like on it goes, So it's just they run out of words to describe people.
The Guardian in Australia, they come up with about Fraser Anning's party, extreme far right.
Yeah, that has been the joke now, is that tomorrow it will be extreme far right. So.
Yeah, we've come up with on the Uncuckables super mega ultra extreme far right.
Well, it is going to have to get to that point at the rate they're going. And as we get closer as well to we're just a couple of weeks away from the anniversary, the first anniversary of the Christchurch massacre, and it's likely that the media will ramp up some kind of anti-far right campaign where they think they've got the emotional state to be able to try and
is Patrick Dieuwe going to do a special commemorative documentary or something?
I hope not, because if he does, I'll probably have to watch part of it for the show. So I really, really hope that if Patrick Dieuwe is watching, he does not do any kind of special commemorative show. That would ruin my day.
To my knowledge, to both of our knowledge, he doesn't stalk you, unlike somebody else.
No, absolutely not. So we don't have to worry about that at all. But it is very possible that Andrew Little will try some kind of hate speech legislation, and Stuart Nash, the police minister, will try get another arms amendment bill through. They were supposed to have the second reading of that tonight, but I haven't seen anything from it yet. So maybe that was delayed, or maybe the outcome was not interesting enough for anyone to report on yet. But that's coming up in the next few weeks, and we'll probably have a lot more about that as we get closer to that. And we will likely have some news items related to that come up.
Well, the first parliamentary sitting fortnight wrapped up at the end of last week. It's been spoken about that the Parliament is not sitting much this year. There's throughout the month of April, for example, there's hardly any sitting days, and up until the May budget, which we don't know whether it'll be the surplus as promised. It certainly won't be as big as they announced on budget night 2019, which was 7.1 billion. They've sort of changed their language to say it'll be a balanced budget, because obviously bushfire recovery fund, that's 2 billion, and then the coronavirus is taking a hit to tax receipts, and also because there's going to be another rescue operation of the Australians trapped on that Princess cruise ship in Japan.
And New Zealanders as well. I want to thank Australia for stepping up, where this is an area where Jacinda's done absolutely nothing, but we have New Zealanders trapped. We had New Zealanders trapped in Wuhan and on these cruise ships. And actually, thanks to Scott Morison for actually offering Kiwis a ride back home.
Yeah, who says he doesn't care about New Zealanders?
but he does.
Oh, well, because we just offload our non-citizen criminals.
Yeah, you do. That's right. But he cares enough, at least on the international stage, to pick up our citizens for us. So I'm glad that we have one Prime Minister looking after New Zealanders abroad.
Yeah. The coronavirus travel ban in Australia has been extended for another week, which is obviously going to cost the economy more, but there hasn't been there's been obviously cases in Australia, but they're people who've been to Wuhan. But yeah, they just don't want to risk any sort of outbreak. There's been this big campaign the past week from the media to go to your local Chinese restaurant, because a lot of people are hypochondriacs and think if they go to a Chinese restaurant they'll get coronavirus. And then of course there's the implication that if you're not eating Chinese food at the moment, you must be sort of racist bigot. It's sort of like
exactly.
yeah.
Hey,
eat the food bigot.
Food bigot. Yeah, we had the Jacinda likes to, whenever there's a tragedy, she likes to go and give people hugs, and so there were lots of jokes about Jacinda having to go and give hugs to in coronavirus affected areas, which those are the kinds of jokes that you open yourself up for if you start going into this whole if you don't show your love enough for the Chinese people. Actually, I saw Chinese embassy actually ran advertisers promoting video where they went around the streets asking people if they were afraid of Chinese people, basically, and then people saying, "Oh no, we're not afraid of Chinese people at all," and running that as promotional material.
Well, our Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, he posted on his Facebook page Saturday night that he and his family were having a Chinese takeaway, and Paul Murray, who's the Conservative straight talker as he promotes himself on Sky News, he ordered Chinese food on the air through Uber Eats or whatever, and it turned up in the second hour of his show. Wanted to show his solidarity. So it does have it's bipartisan. It's
good. I'm glad it is.
So I've never really been
next time.
Yeah, I've never really been fond of Chinese food myself. So basically, my pattern of consumption of Chinese food hasn't changed at all. I eat as less of it as I did before.
You should join in and signal your virtue, and next week we should both get some Chinese food to eat on air.
So sort of eat it.
No. Anyway, anyway, thanks for reminding me that I need to get Chinese takeaway this week. I appreciate that. Amy will be watching. She can book that in for a meal later this week. So there you go. I want to make sure I'm not going to get in trouble for not being diverse enough.
I remember though on Paul Murray Live, Bronwyn Bishop didn't eat the prawn crackers because she was allergic to seafood. So she didn't quite have the whole everything that was on the menu.
That's not excusable in this day and age.
We did lose this week an Australian brand icon. The Holden brand, General Motors, is discontinuing it completely. They believe that it's not financially viable to have this brand to make right-handed vehicles for the Australian and New Zealand markets, because we drive on the left side of the road in Australia and New Zealand, which the driver sits on the right-hand side, while in the United States and Europe, it's they drive on the right-hand side of the road. Driver's seat is on the left-hand side, which makes me wonder with the English Channel, the tunnel under there, because obviously it's a road between England and France. What's the sort of, how do they manage, obviously, because in mainland Europe they drive on the right side of the road, but
I think they have some kind of bridge where it kind of crosses over to the other side. It's been too many years since I've driven through it, but I do remember, I would have been 5 or something at the time. But yes, that's how they'll handle it, because you can't, unless they have a traffic light intersection. That's a possibility too. You never know.
Because General Motors, they held the rights to this iconic Australian brand, and 10 years ago,
New Zealand brand as well.
Yeah, 10 years ago, they were still making cars in Australia, or mainly in South Australia. They're basically holding a knife to the Holden line, saying if you don't give us taxpayer subsidies, bailouts, so we're going to sack all these people. And this is how easily Labor at the time and the left were sucked in. It's like, we've got to support the workers by giving out corporate welfare. Like, it's just another example of how the left get totally sucked in. And the Gillard Labor government at the time gave them $2 billion subsidy, which went until 2016. And when Tony Abbott became Prime Minister, because the Gillard government had set the precedent that they'd give free money to corporations who'd threaten to take jobs offshore. SPC Admona, which is owned by Coca-Cola, they demanded a bailout for their can-making facilities in the Murray region of Victoria, and even Qantas at the time, they wanted a bailout, and the Abbott government rightfully said no to all of them. And last Holden subsequently announced that they were going to be discontinuing their car production here. Last Holden came off the factory floor in 2017. It sort of seems to me that General Motors, they're discontinuing the Holden brand just out of spite. That they want to, like, you didn't give us your taxpayers' money, so we're just going to take this brand away from you. That's sort of how it seems to me. They've sacked 600 workers by getting rid of the Holden brand. There's going to be a few still left over for warranties, because obviously there are cars on the road which will have the Holden logo on them, but Holden is also an iconic Australian surname as well. Obviously, Mark Holden, famous teen idol from the 70s, an Australian Idol judge, and one of Australia's most prolific actors, Frankie J. Holden. So they can't take the Holden completely out of Australia.
And New Zealand police, of course, use Holdens, drive Holdens. Perhaps in Australia they do as well. And so we'll be interesting to see what kind of cars the police forces are going to have to switch over to as well. They've got apparently, reading here, 10 years of servicing and support. So we'll see, because there's no car manufacturing done in New Zealand. The Holden, which was considered a New Zealand car, of course, was manufactured in Australia until now, I suppose. And most of our cars are imported from Japan. So it's going to be quite interesting. But I think
there's all these unanswered questions, like what's going to happen with the V8s, Ford versus Holden, and Bathurst as well. Because also, most famous drivers of Holden's, obviously Peter Brock, Mark Scaife. So it's not just obviously it was a local brand, but the fact it had that sporting cultural impact as well.
We shall see, but in the end, it's likely a case of the New Zealand and Australian market being a bit too small and to support this kind of industry without subsidy, because they clearly have pulled out. They have clearly bailed completely since they didn't get their corporate welfare. And there's a lot of corporate welfare that goes around in New Zealand as well. But I think we'd be better off. The governments don't think of this, although they probably do, but they wouldn't follow through on it. But it's clear that if the if the margins aren't high enough for companies, you should just be providing tax cuts across the board for workers and for companies, so they can pay workers more as well. That will be far more beneficial. But yes, to get tax cuts across the line seems to be impossible.
It also didn't help Holden in South Australia that the state government eventually blew up all the coal-fired power stations, and of course there was the infamous South Australia blackout in, I think it was 2017, because the extension cord to Victoria got knocked. in a storm. So obviously, South Australia has some of the highest energy prices in the world, and businesses are not immune from that. And there's also another debacle going on in South Australia at the moment with because they got given the submarine contracts for our next batch of defence submarines. It's a French company that won it to make it in South Australia. Most people say to save the Defence Minister Christopher Pyne's seat, which he retired from anyway. But there's all these holes in the contract about how much it's supposed to be made of, how much of them is going to be sourced from Australian materials. Like, obviously they're going to be constructed in Adelaide, but how much of what's actually in the submarines is going to be sourced from Australia. And then there's the time delays as well. And it just shows how terrible we are at defence procurement.
Yeah. And even we actually had I believe the last aluminium smelter or steel smelters are threatening to pull out of New Zealand as well over the zero carbon bills and the high electricity prices. They want special deals on that. And it's not too hard to build another dam or I believe we've got one semi coal power plant still going, but I believe they may have cut that off completely in Huntly. But we have natural gas, we have some geothermal stuff. It's easy enough to increase electricity production just a little bit to make it more viable for some of these large industries that are heavily dependent on electricity, and of course to bring prices down across the board. But we seem to have too many greenies and too many NIMBYs around to make any of that happen.
Well, that's the big standoff in the coalition party room over coal, the coalition coal clash, as I call it, because I spoke to you about the National Party leadership spill, which Barnaby Joyce failed to get back to the leadership, and his ally and then Resources Minister Matt Canavan resigned from cabinet to support him and is also on the backbench with him. They've launched their own podcast, the Weatherboard and Iron podcast, and from the backbench they're lobbying for the federal government to fund a coal-fired power station in Queensland because, well, what woke corporation, yes, I use the word, is going to invest in a coal-fired power station?
We nearly went a whole hour without that word. You ruined it.
Yes. It's the end of the show, so I just got lazy.
Terrible. And we have India, China, they're all building coal plants as well. We've got a lot of coal reserves in New Zealand, and it's actually the good stuff, the clean coal, the green coal, as the right wingers sometimes like to call it. That's much nicer to burn than the stuff that you have in Australia even. So we need some New Zealand coal mining industry, to get up. I think we may need to try and do some campaigning on that this year.
But they're coming into conflict with the inner city Liberal MPs who are scared that they're going to lose these blue ribbon seats to Labor or the Greens or independents like Zali Steggall, because there's because what's popped up in the past year, including the federal election, is these independent climate candidates, which former Liberal Julia Banks, she was a member of that, running in Flinders. There is Oliver Yates, who ran against Josh Frydenberg in Higgins, and they're being assisted by Malcolm Turnbull's son, Alex Turnbull, who he obviously he's his own person, Alex Turnbull, but he seems to be clearly leading the Turnbull family vendetta against the Liberal Party. And of course Malcolm Turnbull, now that he's not Prime Minister, is demanding more action on climate change, and he's got his biography coming out in April, which everyone's sort of wondering, God, what's he going to say in that?
Yeah. We are just closing in on 10 p.m, so I think we can wrap it up unless we have any other urgent topics and any super chats or anything from the audience. It's been great to have you all here tonight, and I have been reading the comments. I did go through them once or twice.
And let us know in the YouTube comments. Don't just let us know in the live chats, because we do like YouTube comments attached to the live replay, that helps us. Whether you would like to see the show move to 6 p.m. Friday, that's question number one, and whether the show should change its name to Tasman Talk.
Yes. And because Entropy wasn't working, I couldn't run a poll, but I'll try and run a public poll this week or next week. It'll be before the end of the month because we'll be making the switch over in March. And that's 6 p.m. For Melbourne and most of Australia, I suppose. And that would be an 8 p.m. slot in New Zealand. For the New Zealand audience would be Friday, 8 p.m. For Trad or Trans Tasman Talk, whichever you prefer.
And, of course, I'll be back tomorrow night for Wilmsfront at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. I didn't have a show on Monday evening. I did do a Friday show, which I hadn't done for the previous week. So I'm still in the habit of skipping a show a week, but I'll make sure as much as I can to do the 3 shows a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. But XYZ Live didn't also air on Monday, its normal Monday night. So basically, when we're not on, or when no one else is on, Dusty Bogan has just been going live randomly all the time. He just asks, "Is anyone going live?" And so yeah, he jumped in on Monday night and did a stream. He's been in the chat tonight. He's promoting his 2020 push-up challenge to get fit.
One more thing before people start to head off. There is a debate this Saturday at 2 p.m. New Zealand time. So it's going to be a debate on conservatism versus libertarianism with yours truly on the conservative side and Stephen Berry from the ACT Party on the other side. It's going to be broadcast on D-Live on James Davidson's channel. And there's an event up on Facebook. And if you need a link, I'll just comment and we'll send it through. But that's going to be Saturday, 2 p.m. And just follow along on the Right Minds Facebook page and Facebook group. And then you'll be able to watch along live and comment and contribute to what hopefully will be quite a cool debate/discussion.
Yeah, and it will be a proper debate discussion because you mentioned previously Stephen Berry, member of the ACT Party. I quite like him. He's I used to be obviously when I was on Facebook, I was Facebook friends with him. All his posts, they were always completely principled. He's definitely not you're definitely not debating one of those keyboard libertarians who writes taxation is theft and think they're a dissident enemy of the state.
Although the ACT Party has been running taxation as theft memes as of this week, so you know it's coming.
Yeah, it's become as repetitive as cringe as the Epstein didn't kill himself now. I mean, it's lost its impact now that everyone's saying it.
Exactly. Yeah. Good, but I'm sure it'll be interesting, and yeah, hopefully we'll kind of focus on the actual philosophical differences and less so on the political infighting stuff. So
tomorrow night on Wilmsfront, I'll be catching up with Richard Wollstonecroft, director of Melbourne Underground Film Festival, and of course host of Report from Tiger Mountain right here on the Unshackled channel. Obviously catching up on the Oscars and the latest in Pedowood.
And that's all from us tonight, I believe. And so thank you very much for watching. And go to rightminds.nz if you want to read more of my articles. I usually have at least one a week. Thank you to the BFD as well for running my content. And you can go to rightminds.nz to /donate if you'd like to contribute. I'm trying to put together a few people to do $5 a month donations to cover hosting costs and other mundane stuff. I just do this as a hobby. So Tim's the one who does this for a living. So if you've got if you want to support him to keep him on the air as well, go for it.
Yeah, we've got our Unshackled membership program, which we've got a few of our regular chatters in here. They've signed up, which is great. The unshackled.net/membership. Awesome. Of course, the unshackled.net has we post the links to all of our shows and also articles as well. And I'm also in the process of uploading the archive of this show and Wilmsfront to Rational Rise TV, which is under the direction of James Fox Higgins, which is a a self-hosted video platform where our videos cannot be deleted, or we can't be deplatformed because of community standards or community guidelines, because we just saw Nick Fuentes, his YouTube channel got nuked, and D-Live, they also have community guideline standards, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, so it's good to have your content in a few different places, and it's one of the reasons why I always like to mostly I do writing, of course, but I like to self-host that because then nobody can cancel you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good night, everyone, and we'll see you next Tuesday for likely the final Tuesday show of Trans-Tasman Talk.
Yeah, we will see you for the final time next Tuesday.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trans-Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman Nations, visit theunshackled.net and rightminds.nz.